Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're we're back after a holiday. It feels kind of weird. Feels like it's been an age.
Right? It feels like a month.
I know.
It feels like we've been away for a month.
Everything this year feels like it takes forever.
Yeah, you probably ate for a month, right?
Yeah, it was just I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow, so I was watching, my wife and I watched Queen's Gambit on Netflix, which was excellent, by the way.
Was it? I've been resisting on taking it on, but
Yeah, it was
I'll
good.
follow your advice.
So we started watching this other show on HBO. It's called, what was it called? It's called The Something.
Something.
I can't remember.
Maybe that's a new show.
I can't remember it. It's got Nicole Kidman in it, and
Oh yeah, the
Hugh Grant. See?
yes.
Nobody can remember it. The Unraveling or something? I don't know. But The Undoing, that's what it was. Anyway, so we started watching that a few nights ago, and it was like, we're like, oh, this is pretty good, And then last night we were like, oh, I guess the finale came out, so we're like, well, we should watch it. So we started watching it, and we'd caught up, and so it was getting late. We're like, well, let's just watch it because we gotta know what happens. So then, like halfway through, my 7-year-old comes downstairs, and he's like, I can't sleep. I think there's a tarantula in my bed. I'm like, all right. So we went upstairs and made sure there was no tarantula in his bed. I don't even know if tarantulas are native to this part of the world. I don't think they are, but whatever. So there's no tarantula, so we put him back to bed. We watched like 10 more minutes, and then my daughter gets up. And she's like, well, I can't sleep. I'm hungry. And we're like, well, let's just, And she's like, her eyes are barely open. So we're like, all right, that's fine. Just go back to sleep. Just go back to bed. So we got to put her back to bed. We get like 10 more minutes in, and then the littlest one wakes up. And we hear a thump, and of course he had climbed out of his crib and came toddling into our room. So we're like, all right, fine. So anyway, it was like 1:45, and we finally were like, okay, we're going to finish the show. We've got 8 minutes left. And so we finally finished it. But I'm a little tired today. I guess I'm just a little sleepy because I had to get up and take kids to school, and saw my daughter, and I was like, oh, fancy seeing you here again. It feels like you were just in my bedroom, 2 hours ago. So anyway, yes, I'm a little tired, but anyway, did you have a good holiday, Mr. Natskis?
It was good.
Yeah.
It felt weird because it felt like a weekend. So after 2 days, it's like Monday. I need to go back to work. No, it's still Wednesday. And then and then after 2 days, I was like, oh, it's Monday. Oh no, it's just Friday. It felt really weird that it was a continuous set of days off. I did a lot of random stuff and spent time with the kids as much as we could. We put our Christmas decorations up. It's a record for the Matskas family because this is the earliest we've ever put up Christmas decorations in the 16 years I've known my wife. So for us, it was a big thing.
That's fun.
And it took 2 days to put them up because my wife has 12 boxes of Christmas decorations. a whole shelf. One side of the garage is dedicated to Christmas decorations.
Yeah.
And she was like, maybe we should buy some more. Like, no.
Yeah, it sounds like
I'm putting my foot down.
That sounds like somebody I know. It sounds a lot like somebody I know.
Yeah.
We had years ago we bought a fake tree, and we had our main room is like one of those rooms that's got double height or whatever. So we buy this tree, and we put it up, and my wife starts kind of laughing, and she's like, "It looks so pathetic in this room because the room's so big." So we had to buy another one, and the other one that she bought was. It's enormous, and it weighs a ton. And so we put ours up, which was early for us too. But it's like, well, what else are you gonna do, And
exactly, everyone in the neighborhood has had their Christmas decorations 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And we felt like left out because we're the only
That's
ones.
fast.
You know what? I think COVID just got people crazy and they didn't know what to do. So we're like, let's put the Christmas decorations up.
Well, ours is.
Our cul-de-sac is like an airport strip. You can actually land the plane. There's so much lights out there. You can see it from space. I'm kidding you not.
Yeah, I mean,
Let me take a picture.
we have like no we have no decorations from like for the bottom 3 feet because the 2-year-old. I mean, we did, but he's taken them all off, and my daughter took all the soft ornaments, and she wants to be a dentist. Don't know why. She wants to be a dentist, so she took them all and she laid them in the recliner, and she's been working on all of their teeth. So so it's been an interesting few days around here. I was kind of ready to go back to work. I was like, oh, is it Monday yet? Time for you guys to go to school? And like, oh no, it's only Thursday. So anyway, and then today we have a professional trainer, someone
Professional trainer. Exactly.
someone who
That's what a job title says.
someone who actually knows how to train people, unlike the two of us who just fall on our faces in front of people, which is sort of learning by osmosis, I guess. Today we have Peter Tender, who is an Azure Technical Trainer, coming to us from Belgium, was it?
Beer and chocolate.
And fries. Don't forget the fries.
And fries, yeah.
That's right. Very nice.
Fries when you get beer and chocolate, come on.
Well, you can do beer with fries, and then you can do chocolate for dessert.
Or adding
That's
chocolate
a staple diet. Or chocolate sprinkle fries, yeah.
on the fries.
And waffle.
Yep. So I guess it's afternoon for you, but it's almost afternoon for me too. So I'm used to. We can never actually give a proper salutation because everybody's all around the world. So.
Oh, Christus's mic seems very low. Oh man, people are complaining about that.
See, I told you it was low, and you said it was fine. It was a me problem. So.
I don't know what to do. Honestly, like I haven't changed anything on my setup since last week.
I'll just try to turn it up, I guess. Try now. Say something now.
Something now.
Maybe you should be a little bit closer.
Proper dad joke. How about that? Hey,
Do you have those?
Yeah, I have one. I have one if you want to. Although, hey, no judgment because I don't know how funny it's gonna be. Have you heard about the man that lost his left side?
What?
He's all right now.
Oh. Well, that's it for today, everybody. I hope you've.
I'll grab my coat and I'll go.
I hope you've all enjoyed I hope you've all enjoyed it. We're.
My short stint in stand-up comedy is done. Thank you.
I tried to.
Back to you, IT.
I tried to turn you up a little bit. Also, my camera, for whatever reason, is capturing 3 or 4 frames and playing them back. So it's there's only.
Is it a weird internet day then?
There's no telling if we're going to survive the day, but we'll find out soon enough, I guess.
Yes.
And then Bolt is contributing his own dad jokes now. So.
What's the difference between a sock and a camera? One takes 5 toes, the other one takes 1.
Nice.
Wow, that
was better than my. I mean, we're on a roll, man.
Part of my brain.
How are we gonna go from that to DevOps?
Part of my brain is like rapidly scanning, like, oh my god, is this offensive? Is this offensive? Before we laugh at it, I'm like, okay, no, it's okay. It's offensive, but an offensive sensibility is not. It's not actually offensive.
Or offensive to our humor standards, right?
Yeah. So anyway, sorry.
Thank you for contributing, Bob.
Sorry, Peter.
But
Yeah.
if you go back to that guy who lost his left side, then it could be a little bit offensive. Because then it should take 10 toes and not just 5.
You gotta remember, I'm from South Carolina, where I'm almost certain people have 6 fingers and 6 toes on each foot. So, anyway, so that's a great segue. That's a great segue to talking about DevOps when we talk about polydactylism. So let's talk about DevOps.
What is DevOps?
So Peter, what do you do? Do you go hang out with customers and teach them how to use our stuff, or what exactly does an Azure Technical Trainer do?
Well, I guess what? A technical trainer provides technical training on Azure products. That's what we do. Well, no jokes around, so we're part of a global team. So there's, in meantime, I think we're about 200 worldwide, and providing full-time training to larger Microsoft customers and partners all over the world, where before COVID slammed us somewhere mid-March, it meant traveling the world, which for me was mainly EMEA, so most of Europe, a little bit of South Africa and some other interesting places. We're now because we completely switched to virtual deliveries. It's more like a European time zone delivery, but it could be anyone from anywhere in the world. So like this week, I have folks from Singapore connecting, from India connecting, then some other ones from UK connecting. A few weeks ago, there was someone from the US where I'm like, hey, good morning, 9 o'clock Europe. And he's like, well, it's 3 in the morning for me. He was connecting from New York. We're like, why did you sign up for this training? Like, why? I was the only one on schedule for the next coming months. So I'm like, well, okay, that's dedication. So yeah, that's the fun part. And yeah, Azure DevOps is one of the main trainings I'm delivering. It's not just about Azure DevOps as such, it's covering some other DevOps technologies as well. And I'm trying to keep up with some other training deliveries as well. So Azure and training, that's like the ultimate combination for me. Doesn't feel like working, and I think that's the most important part, having fun every single day.
We certainly try to do plenty of that around here. We probably have more fun than we do actually get work done, but you know, to each their own.
But you had to build your own show for that. I'm just getting paid for that.
True. So okay, so the elephant in the room, maybe we'll hit that one first, right? So what's the deal with DevOps and GitHub, right?
Already from the first 5 minutes, come on.
Dude, come on.
I was gonna wait. No, but you know, I figure it's gonna distract me the whole time because I'll be like, well, I mean, what are we doing? So I'm just curious, like, what's the how do they all play together?
Well, easy said. I think one of the wrong mindsets, at least what I pick up from customers when they join a training or when I'm talking at a conference about a topic, is that they're still living in, I would say, the Microsoft 90s mindset, where they go like, Azure DevOps, it has Azure in it, so it's a Microsoft product. And to me, it means that it can only support like .NET applications, right? Where on the other side, you have GitHub, like the open source model, they embrace everything. And a lot of customers don't know that it also supports .NET applications. So you have like almost two different worlds where if you have like a .NET development team and you're mainly using Microsoft technologies, you're probably going to use Azure DevOps. And then you have the other team coming in from the non-Microsoft world, but loving and embracing GitHub. And what happens now with like GitHub Actions is adding that little extra from, we're going to optimize you like your software deployment, software lifecycle, and we're going to provide you like all the core tools that you need to go from version control, software publishing into the lifecycle management. Now, what's still valid in like using Azure DevOps, although we're also mainly positioning GitHub Actions nowadays, is I think everything from what's coming aside from the pipelines. Like the deployment mechanism, that's GitHub Actions, but everything around it from more advanced pipelines, using platform intelligence, like one of the demos I'll try and show you later on, is where you can reuse feedback from like Azure or any other platform. That's, by the way, another misconception that, it's Azure DevOps, I can only use it to publish Azure stuff. Where Azure DevOps can integrate with Docker containers, with Kubernetes, with AWS, with Google, with your on-prem data center even. Mm-hmm. So I think it needs some clarification every now and then. And maybe after this workshop, that could actually help a few of your attendees here as well. Just clarifying the message.
Yep.
I hope that was the hardest question you had in mind for today.
No, I mean, I think we get the question occasionally ourselves, of course, and I've used DevOps for ages, but I've kind of moved a lot of stuff over to GitHub, just mostly sort of organically, not really because of anything in particular. And I don't know. For me, as I'm not working on a massive software team with hundreds of other people, it's GitHub is certainly sufficient for what I need to do, but for DevOps. I mean, I certainly remember using it over the years and over time. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was always DevOps, the default option until GitHub came to play, and I think with GitHub Actions now, it's becoming a little bit more mainstream. Checking your code and use GitHub to quickly deploy somewhere. By quickly, I mean you find the right pipeline to deploy or the right action. It takes a little bit of learning. Hey, somebody in the chat is asking about Rust. Has anybody done anything with Rust here? I've never even touched it. What do you think about Rust? No?
Nothing.
No? I think at Microsoft we had a couple of teams that were looking at implementing some systems with Rust, so not much of experience. I think it's like it's a different community that we haven't really engaged with. Caparino GR says GitHub Actions is something new. It will get better. Yeah, I think more and more we're seeing more and more actions coming now, right? Or more and more capabilities to GitHub Actions. But from my perspective, I think the biggest issue with GitHub is the agile management. The fact that you're missing the boards, or at least I haven't seen boards yet in there. So you can't plan, right, as a team.
Well, probably, I mean, you can, but then, yeah, it's not like a part of the product. But yeah, on the other side, there's, probably so much in like the Azure DevOps environment that might be a bit overkill for a lot of organizations as well. Where they go like, oh, well, we already use GitHub to store the source files. And from here, we're just gonna push them out. And why would I need to move to like an Azure DevOps model? So I think the advantage, at least what I picked up in let's say the last 2 years, is that thanks to the low level entry for using GitHub or moving to GitHub Actions, that there's actually a bigger interest in like DevOps and making it more complete, making it more professional, like using it as an end-to-end tooling, not just for developers, but also for like IT pros actually, moving more into DevOps pipelines, whether it's GitHub Actions or Jenkins or any other tool. In the end, I think it's a good thing to become aware about the DevOps flow and the concepts behind it. And the fact that you use Azure DevOps is interesting because it's part of the Microsoft world. But apart from that, one of the statements I remember from like Donovan Brown, the Microsoft DevOps guru, if you want, is that nobody's going to right-click publish. And even if you look at like ARM templates or CloudFormation on AWS, you could create them, you could publish them using Terraform. It's all like still heavy manual interaction required. Whenever you build a pipeline, you make some changes, you check in the code, you approve it, and bam, the pipeline runs, and yay, the software is live. So it's
also from Donovan Brown, I have to say that one of the things that he talked about was people and culture and not tools as much. And one of the biggest issues I found while I was working with customers was the fact that they thought that DevOps was about tools. They thought that Agile was about tools, when in fact it's about culture and understanding how and who needs to be involved in the whole DevOps process. Because there was still very big separation between what developers could do and what the IT team could do, and then whether security should be involved. And it's a whole change of mindset when it comes to embracing and doing DevOps properly. Nobody does it perfectly, but at least finding a flow that works. And also the dreaded, I've been in cases where nobody wanted to do a deployment. Nobody would volunteer to do a deployment because it was 60 pages of Word, and you had to click through every single thing manually and do it. And the dream was one-click deploy. Yeah. But it was also like, hey, don't deploy on a Friday because if things break, then you're gonna be stuck all weekend doing that. And I've been in companies that would only do one deployment per year. They will build up this kind of anticipation and one deployment per year because it was so big and so involved that they didn't want to do it frequently and they couldn't do it frequently. So going from that into doing a deployment once at the end of every sprint, or at least once a week, or once a day, it will be fantastic. And tools help, but it's more about culture. Like, how do you check in your code? How do you do your code reviews? How do you deploy your infrastructure? And there's so many platforms and frameworks and abilities out there. So at the end, it comes down to how do you train people to understand the importance of DevOps and secure DevOps, and getting the security team involved into the discussion very early on, rather than at the end where, hey, what did you deploy here? Why did you deploy this one? Where's my firewall? You can't run this on the cloud. All these conversations, I've been in places where they had to happen, and it was awful trying to address the issues as an aftermath rather than planning around it. And I spent more time actually talking about why DevOps and how DevOps rather than the tools or pipelines. But hopefully today the people that are joining us have an idea of what DevOps is, and we can show them some more advanced kind of features and take them through the steps, especially with Azure DevOps.
Yeah, let's try. Now, maybe I can, for the ones who are like not into the DevOps concept as much as you guys are. Let's see how far this goes.
Yeah, Pulumi. Some people are saying Pulumi, Azure RM, Biceps. Is it Biceps or Bicep? Bicep. I think it's Bicep, right? I saw John Gallant messing with that over the.
Yeah, Bicep.
Bicep.
Well, so the question there. So the infrastructure as code. So easy said, if you use the Azure platform, you're gonna build Azure Resource Manager templates. But if you use another cloud like AWS, Google, you need to learn another infrastructure as code concept, terminology, syntax, everything. And that's why the other tool like Terraform isn't interesting, because it's like, first of all, a much simplified language, but it's as powerful as ARM or CloudFormation or any of the other ones. But it's by design multi-cloud aware. So the easy way is that once you learn Terraform syntax and you build an Azure template, you could almost like find, replace some keywords and it becomes an AWS template. It's a lot harder than that, but that's like the easy way to describe it. And on the other side, you're also losing some platform integration, where if you deploy an ARM template, you have all the history in the Azure deployments backend, where if you deploy Azure resources using Terraform, the assumption is that you're going to manage like the history of the deployment out of Terraform.
Right.
So Azure is losing some information there, and that's where like Bicep is coming in. I think last week they released version 0.2 or something, and I didn't do a lot with it yet, but in short, it's like everything you know from ARM templates, like really dedicated to the Azure platform, and at the same time the more simplified language. That's a Terraform benefit. But it's still Azure oriented, so not multi-cloud.
So when it comes to things like Terraform, are they essentially sort of orchestrating CLI commands, or are they still generating ARM templates and deploying them? Like what are they doing under the hood?
Well, so they have their own Azure providers, so a little bit like Azure Resource Manager providers.
I see. Okay.
And they have their own HashiCorp language. That's like the simplified. And we might actually jump to a Terraform demo later on. I could squeeze that in somewhere. But the main idea is that, you're going to run like what they call a pre-flight validation, where one of the challenges with Azure templates is you find out if the template is working when you're deploying it, right? And halfway through it, I was like, oh, I'm too bad. I cannot deploy this or that. Or maybe even nothing really wrong with the syntax, but every now and then it's just hard to deploy Azure templates, I guess. Next to that, the complexity of the language. And there's a lot of things that makes Terraform interesting. And it's just one of the so many tools, right? I mean, Pulumi is the other one. The difference, I think, is that Terraform is still more coming in from like a infrastructure as code perspective, typically used by like sysadmins, where Pulumi has more like a development background. So that's, I would say that the next level. You would start with ARM templates, maybe now with like Bicep, or embracing Terraform for the easier language, the multi-cloud aspect, and then moving up to Pulumi. Yeah. But the good news, back to Azure DevOps, if you have ARM templates, Azure DevOps pipelines can deploy them. There's integration with Terraform. I never tried Pulumi yet from Azure DevOps, but I'm quite sure that will work as well.
It's a script,
And
right?
that's-
So technically, you can run anything that is executable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I don't know if
And-
there's a Pulumi. I think what you're saying is that you don't know if there's a Pulumi task itself in Azure DevOps, right?
No,
Yeah.
I never really looked into it, to be
Well, we can
honest.
find out. Just open the
Yeah,
browser and have
we
a
can
look.
try.
Live
Let's
on the
see.
show. You heard it
Yeah.
here first.
Now let me do, maybe for the ones who don't know, like what is DevOps and what are these guys talking about.
Yes.
So it's, again, quite simplified, but easy said, it looks like this. And what it means is that it's a continuous motion where you're gonna integrate different steps in your application or infrastructure, or the two of them together. So for a long time, you talked about developers where they gonna, I don't know, decide on the solution they want to use. So we call this the planning phase. That's where solution architects are around the table telling like, oh, we need, I don't know, a web shop. We're gonna build some e-commerce platform because shops are closed, restaurants are closed, and we still need to like find a new business model. So let's build something that's available on the internet and everybody can buy stuff from all over the world, right? So they decide on what's the language we're gonna use. Is it .NET? Is it Java? Is it Node or anything else? And what do we need to run it? Are we gonna use cloud? Are we gonna use on-prem for security reasons or anything else? From there you start creating, where you go like, oh, we need servers, we need a SQL database or any other database, not that important. And you're gonna build your architecture. And that's typically where you see like source code coming in. And that's all fine with one developer, but it could become a bit challenging with a couple of thousand developers all over the world. And next you probably gonna validate or verify, like, is this actually working fine? Like any debugging, do we have any issues? And from there you're gonna package it. And that becomes your software bubble, where maybe before, if you deployed like IaaS web servers, or the example you shared where you go through like a 60 pages of this is how you deploy our e-commerce platform, you're probably gonna zip it and uploading it, FTPing it, whatever you want to do with it, but it moves from the development workstation into a running state somewhere on a virtual machine, maybe a physical server a long time ago, hopefully not anymore. And your application is running. Now in between, you want to make this a bit smarter, and you're going to move to releases. Now what is a release? It's where you could move to, oh, let's try this out in a dev environment, where we're going to deploy some smaller VMs, and we're just going to test our application. It doesn't like me anymore to change colors, but okay.
You've used too many colors. You used all the colors. That's it.
No, I think your OBS Ninja Magic little pop-up is in the way. So I'm gonna try to hide it, and it's taking away part of my screen. Let's see if it blows up, then thanks for the nice session. See you next week. Yeah, it looks I'm still here. Cool. So out of release, you're gonna validate like, oh, I wanna publish my package. That's my software code. I'm gonna zip it and move it into a dev environment, and I'm gonna test it, maybe do performance testing, some functional testing, like is this app actually working? And from there, maybe moving to like a Q&A, and eventually moving to production, where up here, you're gonna run it in a full production state and not touching it anymore. And then the last part, keeping the sysadmins happy, you're gonna monitor the environment, like what is my performance, what happens if I have 3,000 users as the estimate from the marketing sales team, but eventually, maybe because of COVID again, instead of like 3,000 visitors a day, we have like 15,000, and how do we handle that, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you go back to the architect table, where you go like, hey, architects, thanks for the sizing of the VMs, but it's not good enough. We need to come up with something else. And oh, cool, if you move to 500 servers running this workload, we probably need to do some redevelopment. And we're back at the circle. And that's the repeat part that comes back over and over. And this goes on like basically from day one when you start using this DevOps concept.
Yep.
And I would say that the challenge or the misconception is that a lot of like companies, if you look at like who's really using DevOps, it's like the Facebooks, the Netflixes, the Amazons probably of this world, where they slam you with like, oh, but we run like 300 deployments every week.
Yeah.
Where every hour they push out like new updates, maybe bug fixing and probably some other boring Facebook stuff, I don't know. Where the risk is that a lot of organizations go like, why should we use DevOps? Because we're not deploying software every hour. Mm-hmm. We're not updating our platform every week. Like you said, it's maybe like once or twice a year. But even there, I think it's valid to move to that DevOps concept.
Yeah,
and then some other.
There's a lot of.
No, go ahead.
I've been to customers where they said we want to be like Netflix. It's the other one, right? We don't want to be like Netflix. They were like, oh, we want to be like Netflix. We want to deploy 20 times a day. And when you ask about the business model or what they're building, it's nowhere near the capacity or the needs of Netflix. So somebody in the team will read a blog somewhere that somebody from Netflix wrote, and they're like, oh, that's the pattern that we should follow, or Facebook or whatever. So it's very important for every company to find the right balance and the right cadence for how often they deploy and why they need to deploy in this manner. But what this infinite loop here shows is that there should be a repeatable and accountable process where every step can be accounted for and you can repeat at any point without really having a fear of breaking something. I mean, that's the importance of DevOps. It's not how many times you deploy, it's how you deploy. I think it's more important, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then just quickly checking the chat here. So some of the other tools that came up is like Jira. That's like a project management solution where you create like incidents or tickets, like this is the task that my developer needs to work on.
Right.
So that would, let me move this out. That should belong in the planning stage. Where we talked about Terraform, it's probably somewhere here. Like we're gonna deploy it, so it could be ARM, Terraform, Pulumi, so that would fit in this part.
Yep.
Then the Azure built-in functionality is obviously if you use Azure, you're probably gonna monitor it using Azure tools.
Yep.
And again, that collection of like standalone scenarios, the standalone tooling even, because up here you have your development environment where you might have Visual Studio 2019 or VS Code, or maybe somebody's using, I don't know,
VS
Eclipse for Java.
Eclipse, IntelliJ, Writer.
IntelliJ. And all the other ones, right? Notepad.
Yeah.
Maybe
Notepad
someone's
plus.
still using Notepad for ARM for ARM templates. And it's again bringing all those like standalone snippets of the platform together.
Yeah.
And that's another benefit, that even if you use Azure DevOps for the pipeline, like literally this movement up here, and you're still going to use Jira for the project management, that's perfectly fine. If you use Azure DevOps to deploy against AWS, to deploy against your on-prem VMware environment, that's perfectly fine. And that's the other nice thing about the tooling, that it's so open-minded, and it just gives you everything. And if you don't want to use everything, you just pick whatever keeps you happy, and that's also fine. That was long feedback. Cool. Should we? Okay.
So we got a question from one of the people in chat. So the question is, why pursue IT instead of coding and ethical hacking? They seem similar but less stimulating, and I kind of feel like that's something that, in some ways, all three of us probably have our own opinions on it. But where do you fall? Like, where do you see sort of the delta between IT, right, which I'm kind of assuming to be like ops, and and writing code? Like, what do you prefer, I guess, or what do you see the futures of those looking like?
Well, for me personally, so I came from I would say the pure sysadmin slash consulting but data center focused IT background without any development interaction whatsoever. Even creating like batch scripts or PowerShell scripts was like super hard. Where it got me into Azure like a couple of years back, and it was okay to deploy virtual machines and infrastructure and everything. But if you look at the way like cloud is moving and moving fast, I think having some development notion is probably going to help you. It's not that like building infrastructure is going away. I'm quite sure we're still going to do that in the next couple of years from now. But if you look at containers, if you look at like the whole serverless, where you're going to run something without managing the virtual machines anymore, I think that's probably a better way forward than still being an expert on like Windows Server, deploying storage, deploying networking. Because the platform, again, Azure or any other public cloud is providing you all the building blocks. It doesn't mean that you don't need to know what networking is, that you don't need to know what storage is, but a lot of the pain points from managing your own infrastructure, it's somehow like going away or at least becoming less touchable.
Yeah.
So if I'm like 20 years old and I want to figure out like, oh, should I move to the systems world, or maybe spending a bit more time and learning a development language, I would go for the development language.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit too in the past of, do you want to produce software or do you want to do something else better, right? Do you want to use software to be like the example we used in the chat, you want to be like a super awesome geologist because you know how to write software that automates your job? Do you want to be a really fantastic finance person, or like whatever the thing is that you're interested in? It kind of feels like code gets more and more pervasive as we all get older, and you can sort of turn it into doing other
Basic
tasks better.
Yeah, it's a basic requirement these days to understand coding in order to be able to do your job better. Like biology, for example. All these different fields that in the past wouldn't really come near PCs, now they require knowledge of computers and coding in some cases. Math, physics, chemistry. And there are a lot of people that have gone from those degrees into computing as well, IT.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I wish I learned developing a long time ago, but I didn't, because my math teacher told me that I was too stupid. And I guess he was somehow right, because I was really good in following.
That's not a good thing to say. No, nobody's right about that. Come on.
Yeah, I know, but long time ago, and I guess teachers were a bit more vocal and allowed to be vocal as well. I mean, there was nothing wrong with it, but somehow I had a passion for PCs and messing around with them, and that's what got me in the IT world. But now I'm still struggling with like the more complex coding. I'm learning Blazor to at least pick one language or out of the ASP.NET world. And it's hard getting in where somehow learning Azure, deploying stuff, it's all like doable, but like creating a little web app and connecting to a database and stuff, that's hardcore for me. So so it's, I guess, another statement that the two worlds are still important. We need infra teams, we need developers, and bringing them together, DevOps ultimately is what's going to make this world perfect.
Well,
sounds good, right?
Probably not perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Not perfect, but better.
Oh damn! This is getting recorded. Not good.
For all eternity.
Yeah, not good.
That's fine.
Wow. Well, cool. No, I had no idea there was so much interaction going on in the chat as well.
Yeah.
So actually pretty good. That's what I miss in a lot of the trainings actually. Maybe we should move to like Twitch for training deliveries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun.
It's a great platform.
Send a mail to the managers.
I know we're talking about doing workshops on here soon, so we'll probably have some workshops this spring, maybe even a hackathon too, which I think would be a lot of fun. So.
Damn it, you took it out of my mouth. It's fine. You take all the. I know it's a team effort. We got some really fun stuff coming your way, so stick around. And we haven't said that yet, right? But we are going to be on MS Learn, on the Learn platform, Learn TV, every Wednesday from now on, right? Wednesdays at 8 a.m.
Wait,
from
what?
the 8th of. He's like, what?
Wait a minute. When did I agree to this? Wait a minute.
You've already agreed on that, so it's fine. I've agreed for you.
Oh,
You
okay.
had no voice in that.
Learn TV from December 8th. It's going to be me and JP for 1 hour, doing some more identity fun stuff. So
December 8th, that's like next week.
next Wednesday, yes.
Oh, okay.
JP's like, I haven't planned for
Yeah,
it.
he's like totally
Yeah.
prepared for that.
Yeah, I mean,
Hyperventilating.
you know, I mean, at the same time, we also did a session at like 4 a.m. the other day. So you know.
Oh yeah. We're versatile.
Christos has a shotgun style approach where I'm pretty sure that he has like Twitter hashtag searches, and anything that's even remotely close to a call for paper, somehow they end up with a paper, and it happens to be from us, even though they're like, "Sir, this is a Wendy's," and he's like, "No, really, this is good stuff. You got to see it." You know? I'm just kidding. So anyway, sorry. Okay. So
Like back on track.
Anyway.
Azure DevOps. That
Yeah.
was what we're talking about.
oh, that's right, DevOps. Yeah, that's why we're here. Okay.
Yeah, cool. I'll show you something because we talked about that motion, the flow, but maybe let's try and put something in action. No idea why my screen did a bit weird there, but seems perfectly fine.
Could you zoom
So I'm
in
not
just a
gonna-
little bit, just a notch or two, please?
No, apparently not. Yeah.
That's the first time we had a no.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna-
No, it's
You remind me of my kids where I say like, yeah, go upstairs and put your slippers on or your cardigan. And go like, nope.
no, but I can do a lot bigger as well. But let me know of how it goes.
No, I think that looks pretty
I
good.
think that's good. Yeah.
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 Oh, okay.
It's because some people don't really go on full screen when they watch Twitch, so
Mhm.
they use the whatever window it gives plus the chat. So making it visible for them, I think it's important.
Yeah, perfectly fine. So yeah, it all starts with creating like an Azure DevOps world. What do you need? The login account coming from Azure AD that apparently you guys know everything about. And from there you create a project. So your Azure DevOps is, I would say, your DevOps world. And within you're going to separate it out based on an application you want to publish, based on a dev and test environment or anything else. So I have like a whole bunch of projects up here where just to trying and simplifying and focusing it a little bit, I might pull in like the Terraform example up here. I might pull in like an integration with Kubernetes if you want, or anything else. So the logic is whatever fits for your organization, that's what you go for. So it's not like one big environment where all developers are always getting access to everything. You can literally decide what you want to go for.
Nice.
So let's go for the 425 live. That's what we're doing right now.
I
And
like how
worst
we have
case-
our own project.
How
We
cool
feel
is that?
special now.
It even knows that it's live on Twitch. How amazing is Azure DevOps, right? Now we talked about that planning stage where you're gonna define like who's gonna do what. And in Azure DevOps, it means boards. Now, every now and then boards can become a little bit boring because it's not super technical. But later on, I'm gonna show you where you can actually use that project intelligence. So let's create a work item. Peter needs to deploy a dev environment. And then up here, it means VMs, network, web apps, SQL Azure, to quickly name a few. And priority 2 is fine. And it's a to-do. We're not working on it because we're live presenting. And let's do another one where this time it's a task. And let's do I don't know, live session on Twitch, something like that.
Yes.
Why not, right? And
not?
that's another to do and perfectly cool from here. Oh, and let's assign it to Peter. There we go.
And you can like there's a predefined template for these work items, but you can also extend them and change them as much as you want, correct? Because
Yep, correct.
Some people may be asking, like, I don't want to do to-dos, I want to do some kind of a different kind of a work item. So
Yeah, so that's what you define on project level or even on full Azure DevOps organizational level, where it might be a better fit to maybe come up with like bug tracking, or what I'm actually using for my own purpose is blog item tracking. Every now and then when I have an idea like, oh, I need to blog about this, I'm quickly creating a little work item. It's not called a work item, it's called a blog item, but technically it's a DevOps work item, but just a little different template.
nice. Bolt is saying he has different types like tech debt and changes. So
Yeah, cool.
make it work for your team. That's the whole point there.
So, and then next, once you have your work items, because in a full live environment, there's probably going to be a lot more than these, you're going to allocate them into sprints. Now, what is a sprint? It's, think back about like the running sprints, where you go like you start and you're going to run as fast as possible to the finish. So that's technically what a sprint could be in this scenario as well. But the main idea is that for each and every task or work item or issue or bug or whatever name you want to give it, you're going to define like this is the deadline by the end of next month. We're going to finish it by the end of next week. The new version of the application needs to go live because the marketing team has some ideas around like Christmas benefits or Christmas discounts or Thanksgiving last week, where you could come up like, well, we need to boost the Azure backend, where instead of having 300 visitors every hour, we expect like 3,000 because it's Black Friday or Cyber Monday today. And we need to temporarily move up our environment with a lot more compute power. But as of next week, when the sprint is done, yeah, it's not relevant anymore. So that's what's coming in there. And if something is not finished within the sprint, you're going to move it to a backlog. So up here, I have an item that I need to deploy my dev environment. Most probably I can't finish it within my sprint timeline. And that's why it's moved to the backlog. Because I already know like, sorry, I'm too busy with other fun stuff. So I'm going to move this out to another sprint. That's the idea.
Someone is asking what is artifacts on the site, and I
Oh,
did
here
say
on the
that
site?
Yes, I did say it's a private repository for your packages, but please correct me if I responded wrong there.
No, that's correct. So what you can do, for example, if, let's deploy a little app. Why not? Or at least pick up an app that I already have.
Mm-hmm.
That might speed it up a little bit.
Nobody has complained about my mic, by the way, so I assume it went back to being okay.
Oh, that's the wrong one. Kill it. Close it. No, Visual Studio, don't load. I don't give you time to load. Nope. Not responding. Really?
Yeah.
This is live and getting recorded. You're not behaving, Visual Studio. Come on. Okay, that's good. And let's try that again. Yeah, so what you have in your application development, if you use like .NET, you got NuGet packages, you got NPM for Node, Maven for Java. I'm always mixing those two up. And as a developer, you're gonna grab those packages from the different package resources.
Yep.
Now, in a larger environment, you probably want to standardize it a little bit. So instead of having each and every developer reaching out to the internet, grabbing some NuGet packages, grabbing NPM or Maven packages, you can centralize them in your corporate Azure repos and using the artifacts and publishing them from there. So that's...
And some companies don't really allow you to access external repositories like NuGet. I worked in a bank where everything had to be pre-approved from the IT team before you could grab new packages. So one way of addressing that is by using a private repository like Artifacts, where the IT team has control on which packages are available, and you can point your development environment to that instead of the the public internet-facing one, and that solves a few regulatory and compliance issues. So it's a great way to manage private repos, in effect. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, and that helps in not emphasizing that Visual Studio is slow every now and then. Although it's my app that's actually becoming a little bit too big.
Are you running the latest preview? Or are you on the latest?
Not the latest, but I'm following some updates. But I don't want to like break down all my demos every single week in a training like, oops, sorry, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, living on the edge.
So no, not the latest. I'm already using Canary browser in Edge. That's painful enough. But
I think JP is still on insider previews for his operating system. I decided not to be too aggressive on my new machine, so I am being cautious.
Yeah, I gotta plow my machine this weekend or this week. I might even do it today because it's just out of control. It's gotten bad.
There goes Monday.
I mean, we didn't have anything else to do today, did we?
I've got a couple of meetings.
What other things have you volunteered us for?
What have I signed you up for, right?
That's right.
Let me check
Stop doing
our
meetings.
calendar. Let me check our calendar in a bit.
so here, the whole collection of packages like Entity Framework, and I guess somewhere there's the OWIN and OAuth as well. Because I know that every 5 minutes I need to emphasize identity. So it's part of my app as well. I'm using Facebook and Google. Is that fine?
Absolutely, you're absolutely fine.
See, I'm talking about Edge Canary, and it all of a sudden like, oh, you called me. No, I did not. Artificial intelligence. But so what we have here is my NuGet package that's grabbed from the public internet.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do here is integrating with your Azure DevOps package source on the second line.
Nice, there you go.
And then you could also define that like the Azure DevOps hosted one is becoming the prime one. And like what you mentioned, some organizations don't allow you to just go to the internet and grab them. And then you could actually use your Azure DevOps artifacts as some kind of gateway to grab them from the public repo and handing them over to your internal developers.
Well, and so Sahil's asking if this helps at all with things like security implications of third-party libraries. I mean, my assumption is that this is mostly around sort of having a cache. But could you pin versions? Could you say we only want to use version 3.2.7 of some third-party package because your security teams reviewed it, and so that's the one that's available within your own source? Okay, cool.
And there are tools like Snyk that allow you to scan your packages and dependencies as part of your CI/CD, and it will highlight any security issues. So Snyk has a database of all the CVEs out there, and it will capture any. So if you're using jQuery, I don't know, let's say random jQuery version 6.5 that has been identified to have a security issue, if you're using that dependency in your code, Snyk can run as part of your CI/CD, and as part of the build, it will throw up error messages and not allow you to proceed with anything else until you fix that dependency. And one of the things that we do, that I use to advise people, is to make sure that as part of their sprint, they upload or update their packages and dependencies to the latest ones, or they check at least for any security issues.
Cool. Is that similar to what Sonar Cloud is doing?
I could be. I haven't used Sonar, but I've used Snyk before. I would be surprised if there's only one tool that does that. So, yeah.
Because I'm typically using Sonar Cloud. I've never looked into Snyk, but Sonar Cloud has like a free edition. It's not giving you the full capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
But remind me later on that I'll show you what it looks like, and then you can figure out if it's about similar or not.
Robert Table says Sonar can definitely do that. So there you go. Our community knows better than we do. Thank you, Mr. Robert Tables.
Very cool. Good. Let's see. So we do have our work items in place. We know what to do. We know what the sysadmins need to work on. We know what the developers are working on. So let's move on and actually start using some code. So we started at the question with, yeah, what's the whole thing about GitHub? So I guess for a lot of customers and partners, it's becoming like the go-to repository for storing source code. And thanks for everyone bringing all your code into the Microsoft world. Way to go. That wasn't a good. It's getting recorded. Stop telling all those silly things.
No, I mean I've certainly been to.
I'm not used to that.
I've been to many customers who've said, maybe not many. Many's probably a harsh term, but I've certainly been to more than one who've said, "Oh, we're not gonna put our IP in Microsoft's Microsoft software." And it's like, I mean, I don't. I'm kind of like, well, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we certainly aren't scanning people's code repositories asking for and trying to glean secrets.
We're Microsoft employees who are reading your code.
Yeah, but I don't really know. It's I'm sure there's a valid concern somewhere, but I don't know. I guess maybe we're biased because I know all the privacy and data handling training we all have to go through every year, and it's just like it's so extensive. You kind of feel like, you know, like it almost just seems so sort of just completely preposterous that I don't know how to respond whenever I get asked. Hey, it's the top of the hour. Do we want to take a quick break, get more coffee, more drinks, whatever?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Let's stretch our legs. See you in 2 minutes.
2.5 to 3 minutes. Everybody gets upset if the music loops, so we have to be back before 2 minutes and 34 seconds.
Minutes.
All right, we'll be back in just a minute.
Synchronize your watch.
Okay, we're back. So everybody's reloaded. I think everybody's got what they need to make it through the next hour. So what is that? What is that, Peter? Is it good?
Cool. You mean the session or what I'm drinking?
What are you drinking? Is it good?
I'm supporting the U.S. economy. So it's Mind Haze IPA.
Wait a minute. Belgium has some amazing beers. What are you doing with an American IPA?
Because for me, IPAs are the best beer in the world, and we don't have a lot of IPAs in Belgium. So I'm importing them from the US. This one is from Firestone Walker Brewing in California. Yeah, it's fun. So I had like a little Christmas countdown calendar, 24 cans of beer. But unfortunately, they will be out before the 24 days start.
Wait a minute. Have we even started December yet?
Yeah, they ship too fast.
Yeah, too soon, yeah.
It's a different brewery for every day, and for now I'm sticking to one only weekends or fun moments like this one. Then I think it's perfectly fine.
Well, I think you're trying to cover the fact that we're awful, and you need to have alcohol to make it through the next 2 hours. It could be that as well, right?
Should be good. Should be good.
No, we're having a lot of fun. Let's move on with some Azure DevOps goodness there.
Cool. So the next part, so we got all the project planning, brainstorming done, where the next challenge is like bring in some code, right?
Yes.
So while you talked about like GitHub before, and the nice thing about GitHub is the whole collaboration aspect where you have a whole team of developers or sysadmins, for example, working on PowerShell scripts, working on ARM templates, Terraform templates, anything that you want to store in some central location. That could be GitHub, but it could also be Azure DevOps Repos. So that's your landing page for source code. And from here, we touched on some different development environments. So if you use IntelliJ, that was your preference, I guess, Christos. Visual Studio, VS Code, even if it's not in this list, but it supports some kind of Git integration, then you're still good to go. So from here you can, let's say VS Code, because my Visual Studio takes a little bit longer. And I can switch to another project anyway later on. Yes, you're allowed to open the link. Obviously you need to read what it says, but like any good sysadmin, you're just clicking OK whenever something pops up.
Obviously.
Next, finish.
Next, done. Yeah.
Yep. And then something should happen. There it goes. So it's going to ask me like, you want to store something locally? Yes, we do. And let's do this completely wrong in the root of my disk. When my disk crashes, I loses everything. This is the 425 live. And it starts copying. Now there's nothing on the Azure DevOps side yet because we're just starting a new project. So I'm gonna finish and yes, open it up and there's nothing in there. So what we can do is pushing in some code. So even for already experienced developers that don't use DevOps yet, they go like, well, but it's all fine for new projects where I start from scratch, but you could start whenever you want. So let's copy some source files. Guess that's about it, what I need.
People are loving your broken camera, JP.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what's going on with it. It's probably a graphics. My assumption is the graphics driver, because if I do something in one of the other browser windows, then the camera goes bananas. So I don't know what it is. This has happened before, but then it just kind of went away, and it hasn't happened since.
It's AI. It's trying to keep you focused.
See, it's doing it again.
Task at hand.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll just turn it off for a minute and just let it roll. Maybe I'll unplug my camera and put it back in.
Yeah, go.
You look
for
a bit shaky.
Yeah.
It's because
He's shaking with anticipation.
It's because I haven't started it on my beer advent calendar yet for the day.
Oh yeah. Oh, you're so nervous about me doing demos that the copy is taking a while, but that's fine. I'm not gonna wait for it.
So what are you
That's
copying
where-
right now?
So I'm copying my .NET application,
Right.
the one I showed before with like the 45 modules. So that's why it takes a while.
Yep.
I'm copying it into my Git enabled folder. And the nice thing I can already show you here is that Visual Studio Code or any of the other ones, since now it's becoming Azure Repos, which by itself is Git compatible, it's keeping track of all the changes. So it says like, oh, you start from a fresh environment on the Azure DevOps side.
Yep.
You're injecting code, like all the source files from my app.
Yep.
And from here, there we go. It's recognizing them as changes.
Nice.
Now, once the copy is done, I can check in my files. So let's say this
do you
is
have
my...
do you have a git ignore so you don't check everything in there?
Yeah, but then my app is not going to run because I need everything in my app.
Oh.
But I have a second project available to speed up the demo a little bit.
Right. No, it's fine.
So I'm going to commit the changes and checking back on the repo side and nothing's happening. Why not? Because Git was smart enough to build in like a developer safety net where what I'm doing right now in my local Visual Studio Code is checking in like, oh, these are all the changes. I'm okay with them,
Right.
but I'm not syncing yet to my Azure repos.
Right.
If I go like, oh, something's wrong or oops, I made a little mistake, then nothing's actually happening on the backend.
Okay.
Where down here, let's make this a little bit big because it's super small. There's that little cloud icon, and that's going to allow me to eventually synchronize to my Git compatible, in this case, Azure repos, and checking in code. Which, a little bit of cloud magic. Looks like this. So I have all my source code in there. Cloud is amazing, right? So I got all my source code in here.
Nice.
And I talked about the commits. And what it means is that every developer who's part of your team using the same Azure Repos backend, you can follow all the different steps in that scenario. At the same time, but that's for later on, whenever I'm using code and pushing it out in a pipeline, it's also going to highlight like, oh, this was exceeded, this failed, or because there's something wrong with the pipeline, or maybe there's something wrong with the code and it's not getting recognized.
Right.
And it's also keeping track of all the changes. So this is like a YAML file, just some text configuration file where I didn't have that much in there. And I can see that in this commit stage from this developer, somewhere there should be the name of the person who committed. There we go, here, Peter. Committed the changes yesterday. and I can validate like what actually happened in the previous state and what are the changes. And I could easily go back. So imagine that your DevOps team, it's not developers or ops anymore. The DevOps team is checking in code, making changes, and at some point your pipeline is failing because it's or like buggy code or anything else. Then you could easily revert, go back to the previous stage where you know like, oh well, this was successful, and let's go back to this stage, running a new pipeline, and that's how you could actually fix a lot of problems as well. So we covered project management, we covered the source control, that's the official terminology. And you could even go as far as splitting up different source control environments, where you have one single project, that's my 425 project, where I'm going to store my application source code. But what if I have multiple applications? Because you may have different development teams working on the back office, working on the front office, or the front end apps and the back office apps. And you don't need to create multiple projects to do that. So they can nicely work together. They're not literally sharing code, or at least not having any code conflicts. So let's see how far VS Code is. There we go. Let's push it out into that other repo, and it's running. At the same time, some nice Visual Studio Code integration here. There's this little animal here. It's interesting because it's highlighting the amount of bugs, but in this case, it's highlighting the work items. So I checked in to Azure Repos as Peter. I'm checking in code, and at the same time, it's already telling me like, hey, watch out, you need to work on one work item. So it's like moving some of the project management into my Visual Studio, or in this case, VS Code environment as well. So a pretty nice integration. So moving on, where we're gonna build a pipeline. Don't worry too much about green ones and red ones, it's because I'm messing around all the time. But what's the idea? We have our .NET code, a pretty basic web app, and we're gonna test if the code is actually fine. Now I know you guys are super developers, I'm not, and I can still go through this process. So what we're gonna do is creating what we call a build pipeline. Think back about I lost my whiteboard diagram. But we talked about the planning stage, so let's maybe see, your little OBS is in the way again. So we covered the planning stage with the boards. We talked about the create stage where we use the development environment. And now we're gonna validate code and testing if the code is actually working fine. So two different scenarios. There's the classic model, a little bit of legacy, but that sounds too negative. In easy words, it's using the Microsoft click around and it works approach, or using the more technical one, that's YAML, where you're gonna build a configuration file. So I'll start with the classic. That's
is it true though that the classic is probably going to go away and they will try to standardize on the YAML approach eventually?
Well, probably yes, and there's some good reasons why it is that way. Because so what we're doing here is literally relying on capabilities that are available in the graphical interface. Which means if it's not in the graphical interface, it's not impossible to do, but it's harder to do, right? Mm-hmm. Where partly because of like scenarios like Kubernetes, YAML is somehow becoming a standard. It's a lot easier. And next to that, I'll show you that in the other example. You're actually moving your pipeline. So the definition of this is what I want you to do.
Yep. Testing
software and later on pushing it into Azure. Mm-hmm. That's now also moved into our Azure Repos, where everything I quickly showed you with the commits and the versioning is now also valid for your pipelines itself.
Nice.
So that's a nice way forward. So let's quickly build a pipeline. So the source is Azure Repos. That's where my source code is. But if you have GitHub or enterprise server on-prem, or any other Git compatible scenario, you could again use Azure DevOps to get started. I'm using this project. I'm using my 425 repo, and I'm going to use the main branch. From there, depending a bit on what your application is doing, you could start from a lot of pre-built scenarios, where my app is ASP.NET Core. And validating if your application works typically means you need your package manager, you need to run .NET Restore, you need to run .NET Build, and eventually you're going to create your artifact, where the artifact is like a web zip file, similar to what you did a long time ago in IAS web deploy package, right? So we're technically doing the exact same thing as what we've done the last 10, 15 years, but now we're going to automate it, making it more intelligent. So from here, it's running NuGet install, running NuGet restore, compiling my application, running some testing, but let's skip this one so we can easily disable, publish, and create that little zip file. Perfectly fine. Save and queue. Now what's going to happen here, it's going to ask you like, what do you want to use as an agent? Now what's an agent? It's an Azure running pre-configured virtual machine, like a development workstation almost, where you can choose the version. So we offer Mac, Ubuntu, and Windows environments. If you don't like using public cloud for compiling your software, you could run the build agents on-prem as well, or running them on Azure, but keeping them less, I would say, public cloud oriented.
Yeah, you can also, one of the things that you can work around is, let's say you want to do .NET 6, right? .NET 6 is very private alpha. I'm not saying it's out there. I'm just saying that, let's say the team puts an idly build. 6? Right. Yeah.
I was like, I'm doing fresh demos and I'm showing .NET 5.
No. I'm just saying.
What's the catch with .NET 6?
If .NET 6 becomes available as an idly build, but it's not available as like in one of the agents, what you can do is you can spin up a VM with your custom dependencies, i.e. .NET 6, and then run your jobs against that. So you don't have to wait for GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps to become for these things to become available in these frameworks, so you can start using them. Yeah. Cool.
So from here, in the meantime, it starts running. So it's validating code. It's grabbing the NuGet package. And this is literally 100%. If I go back to my development environment, and I'm going to run, let's do, anything without DevOps, just local development environment, you would go build solution. And from here, it starts compiling the software, right? So it's going to run the NuGet packages. It's going to run .NET Build, .NET Restore. And all this is exactly the same, but now it's happening in a cloud-based environment. Now, for some reason, it's not working. I think you somehow scared it by talking about .NET 5 and 6 and making it even more confusing. So up here, it's telling me like, sorry, you want me to use .NET 5. I have no idea what .NET 5 is, but we're going to try and help you. Install the SDK, target version, yada, 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 detailed logging, and making things easy. If you read the development guide, it means NuGet 4.4.1 is like .NET 3.1 language. We need to move this up. Yep. So let's go back into the pipeline. One more step back in the pipeline.
And if I'm not wrong, I think you can also download the specific version of .NET Core you need, right? And install it.
Yeah, but you don't have to do that. You're just going to tell the pipeline to do that.
Yep.
So, that's the wrong one. Come on. 3 minutes ago, that's the one. Edit pipeline. And we're gonna tell, like, we're gonna use 5.8. How do you know? Just by reading the documentation like any good developer, right? Save and queue. And just for the fun of it, instead of using server 16 with Visual Studio 17, I want to test against 19 because that's identical to my local development environment, to avoid any glitches with version differences whatsoever. And from here, the exact same thing. It's going to start up, and I have the backlog with the commits from my developers. I can see the repo, it's already running, and eventually it's going to produce one compiled piece of software. Just going to wait until it's kicking off. Or not even wait, I don't need to wait for it. The reason why it every now and then moves something into the queue is because it's linked to my internal subscription, which means I'm not paying for it, which means it's low priority. And if it's a bit too busy, then every now and then it takes a couple of seconds. But in a real life scenario, once you push it out, it's actually gonna run fine. So this one is running. So let's switch to the newer model and creating a new pipeline, where this time we're gonna step away from the classic and creating a YAML-based version. My code is still in Azure Repos. It's in the repo location, and the starting point at least is about similar, where you have a whole collection of pre-configured YAML templates to deploy Docker containers, compiling them to deploy something to Kubernetes, or what I'm going to do, integrating ASP.NET. Without doing anything, it's bam, that's your YAML file.
I like
Most of the
bam, you got it.
Most of the settings that I used in the classic editor, like
Right.
clicking around and defining like, oh, you need to use Windows latest, Windows 19, that's already up here. It's recognizing ASP.NET Visual Studio solution, and we're gonna use NuGet tool install. So that's like one line, and that means just bring me the NuGet package installer. From there, we're gonna run.
Quick question, Peter.
Yep.
Can you take the classic pipeline and move it to the new one, or do you have to rewrite everything or recreate all the tasks by hand? Do you know?
You're going way too fast, but yes,
Sorry,
you can
man.
do that.
Sorry.
No worries. But
Jumping ahead.
yeah, for you it's like, for you it's 9 in the morning. I mean, for me it's like 6:30. and the can is not really helping that.
I'm firing on all cylinders.
Sure, you can. So the nice thing I'll show you from here, by the way. So it runs NuGet install, NuGet commands, and Visual Studio, or the VS build, similar to what I showed you. From here, maybe there's a task you want to run,
Right.
for which you don't know the YAML and you're too lazy to Google and find it. So you go like, well, maybe I want to run some .NET Core. So let's move to the end of the file. Come on, IntelliSense, I don't need you for now. And we're gonna add a new task, .NET, I don't know, publish, something that we didn't do before. We want to provide a zip package because that's later on what we're gonna upload into Azure. And let's see, advanced working directory. There's some IntelliSense here where we go like the default is system, but since it's default, I don't need to do anything. So cool.
Ah, nice.
And adding it, bam, that's a new task. So this is like almost similar to what I had before in the classic editor. That's now been moved into YAML.
Right.
The other scenario, I'm not gonna save this because I already had one, is back to the classic editor, which was this one. There we go. And what you can do from here, for each and every step, up here, view YAML. So if this is your existing pipeline from, I don't know, 2 years ago when you started Azure DevOps, where nobody was already using YAML, but now you go like, oh, this is powerful, interesting to use. I got my pipeline as code as well. You could easily migrate from one environment to the other.
Nice.
If you want to find out like what's NuGet 5.8 and YAML syntax, it's these 4 lines of code. So you copy it over, you go back to your classic, you go back to the YAML pipeline, the one that I didn't save, smart Peter. editing this one, and it was already in there because it's an existing example. But before, out of that next finish, YAML, it only showed me NuGet tool install, step 1, but it didn't have any details about the version. So the default in DevOps was still 4.4.1, but we already knew that that version was not compatible with my .NET 5 example. And just copy pasting from classic to YAML, and that's basically it. Cool. So we have our successful pipeline. In meantime, everything's green. And it ran about 5 minutes ago, and it took about 2 minutes to compile.
Very
Go
nice.
through NuGet install, the NuGet restore, building, testing, publishing, everything. And the outcome is a web zip package.
All green. I love green.
So up here, it's published, and that's what we're gonna use. What's behind it? Some deployment comment files that the back agent needs, and my source code webapp.zip. That's again the same web deploy package from 15 years ago on like NT4 server. No, that's 25 years ago, but still the same concept. So we're gonna move on, and this time, back in the DevOps world, we came from source control up here. We validated, verified package, everything's working, it's all green. We have the package. And now we're gonna release it, which means we're gonna push it out. Now, a good practice would be running a dev and test environment, maybe staging, and eventually production. So let's move to release. I already have a few of those.
What is the, like when you speak to teams and developers, do you advise them to have a number of environments to play with? So in the past, I've seen dev test where people will just deploy to a test environment. Usually a lot of developers will push a lot of things throughout the day so they can quickly try and see if anything is failing, if the merge is working okay, and what have you. Then there was a proper test environment where the testers would go and test the released product. Then that was less changes. Then there was a QA environment, which usually mirrored the production environment, where business would go, like business people or project managers would go and check that the product is ready for release, and then they would sign off the QA, and then there was a production environment. Do you get to work in the same kind of setup? Do you have advice for other people to follow, anything like that?
Well, I think it depends a bit on like what's the workload you're deploying. I think the dev and test is probably still valid, because what you see, and I'll show you that in what the release looks like as well. So this is your artifact. That's our, in this case, the web application package that we compiled and waiting to be used. Where from here, you would probably move it to like dev and test, Q&A, staging, and eventually production.
Right.
And depending a bit on how you're gonna run the testing, if it's just functional testing, dev and test could be okay. Like you mentioned, there's not too much difference between dev and test Q&A. It could be performance testing without changing anything in the code. Now, another scenario that's becoming a bit more popular, and that's literally what we're doing within Microsoft for like Edge, but also Windows, and probably a lot of other tools, is, for example, the Canary deploy or Canary build, where next you have what we call the early adopters, and then you're going to move to production. Now, the main difference is that you still have like the 3 environments, but the difference is that your Canary is already used in production-alike scenarios. Like down here, and I can't really zoom in, but if you look at my browsers, yes, I'm using Edge for obvious reasons. I'm using the Canary build, I'm using the developer build, and I'm using the production one, where the Canary one is updated, basically whenever I start it. It's like every single day there's like, oh cool, there's a new version. The development one is the early adopter, where I know up front, like every now and then it's gonna crash. It's not 100% production ready. And eventually we have the production version that we, release like every 6 months or something. So depending on the scenario, the use case, I can imagine that like the Facebooks, Netflix are probably using Canary for all the cool fancy stuff, and the production build for the more stable capabilities, right? If you tell me that your finance organization is using Canary builds, I would be a little bit worried, at least for like mobile banking and stuff, because I really want to use like a stable version of the apps. So it depends a bit on the app and the business you're in, but definitely somehow stepping away from dev and test, because what you have with the dev and test staging is that you're still going to test and validate, but it's only internal users. Where now with Canary, you're typically opening it up to the rest of the world. Like a few months ago, Facebook, with that avatar little gig, they opened it up to like West Coast and US and eventually spreading out across the world. And every day, every couple of hours, they were literally fixing all the bugs coming in from the US. And by the time like APAC is using it, all the bugs are being fixed already, thanks to the open user adoption.
Nice.
Cool. So let's create a new pipeline. So I created a build pipeline before compiling the software. And now we're going to move this into running state where, no surprises, I'm going to use Azure as my target platform, but it doesn't need to be. So we start from our artifact, where an artifact is typically what I compile in the previous build stage, but it doesn't limit ourselves to Azure DevOps build. It can be a pre-configured set of code in Azure Repos itself, like an ARM template. You're not going to go through like NuGet build restore everything for an ARM template. If you have GitHub, we already talked about it, or if you use another DevOps tool like Jenkins, super popular, you could also integrate from there. And grabbing, I have no idea which one because my naming convention isn't the best one anymore, but let's hope it's this one. I'm going to use the default version that's the latest, which means every single time my developers are checking in code and I'm running a new build, that's going to be my new artifact that I'm going to use to publish. And we're going to publish in, come on, a new stage. And what we're going to do again, using some pre-built templates, we're going to deploy Azure App Service, or you want to deploy to an existing Kubernetes cluster, or you want to deploy to an IaaS running virtual machine, or anything else. A lot of virtual machines in here, functions, and if it's not in here, we can start searching. So let's do AWS. Nothing for AWS, but we could start with an empty job and compiling it. Why is it not showing anything for AWS? Because I didn't configure the connectors for that, but it's definitely part of the possibilities.
You can deploy to anything, right? AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, on-prem, Kubernetes.
Even running, well, I'll show you, running PowerShell scripts, Azure CLI, running Google Cloud CLI, and that's what you need to move on.
Inception.
Yeah, it's a little bit laggy. So this is dev and test, right?
Sahil is asking how does Azure DevOps connect to AWS?
Oh, so you need to, I'll show you. So there's a connector that you need to configure, which by the way, I also need to do because I need to mention identity every now and then. So I need to come up with permissions to actually allow my pipeline to communicate with Azure. And once I'm there, I'll show you how it works for AWS as well. So I'm creating a stage called dev because I'm going to publish to my dev environment. And here I need an Azure subscription. Now, since I'm logged on, up here I'm logged on as Peter at Microsoft. Like there's only one Peter at Microsoft, but anyway. But it doesn't always mean that I'm going to run my pipeline, like pushing something into Azure, using my Peter account.
Yes,
so,
please don't, especially if you're an admin,
right? Probably not. So what we need is a service connection. So what is a service connection? And you're probably going to love this. It's where you define like what is your target environment. It's AWS, but AWS with Terraform. How cool is that? It's Azure Classic. Stop doing that. We're not doing Azure Classic deployments anymore. It's Resource Manager. It's Chef integration, Docker hosts, which could be Kubernetes or anything else. And somewhere that's where you find AWS as such as well in that list, but there's a lot more. So somewhere, easy said, You use the Azure DevOps as the deployment mechanism, and the target environment, in the end, we don't really care about it. Worst case, it's PowerShell scripts. Worst case, it's like GCP CLI, what I configured for a customer a couple of weeks ago. SSH connecting to like a Linux Apache web server, and you're good to go. So back to Azure, we're going to integrate with Azure Resource Manager, and we need a service principal. Now, what's a service principal? I know you can explain this a lot better than I do, but it's like emulating an admin user object out of Azure Active Directory and defining permissions like you're allowed to do this in the Azure platform. If you have the correct permissions, I could make this easy, automatic, next, finish, and done, but nobody trusts a developer to do that, so we don't have those permissions, and we need to use the manual approach, where we need some information. I'm going to use Azure Cloud. I'm going to scope it on subscription. If you want, you could scope it on lower level as well. Like you can deploy to this particular resource group in Azure, but you can never touch any of the other ones. But just to keep it easy for the demos, I'm going to keep my subscription. So the next step is I'm going to switch hats a little bit and pretending that I'm an Azure admin. So I'm switching to my Azure environment, and we're going to create a new service principal. There's a couple of different ways to do this. You can use Azure Active Directory and creating what we call an app registration, but we're confusing users a little bit because we're not using app services, although we do. And next to that, I actually like Azure Cloud Shell, and I even can memorize some of the commands here. So we're going to do AZ, that's interacting with Azure, AD, interaction with Azure Active Directory, SP to create a service principal, and we're going to provide a name called a 425 Live service principal. This is going to be tricky. I don't like exposing my service principals on a recording. How do you fix that, technical guys?
Do you want us to... I can hide your screen for a minute while you do it. I don't have any Jeopardy music, but I can hide it for a minute while you get it. You want to do that?
Yeah, let's hide the screen.
Yeah, maybe.
All right, hang.
Or you
All right,
can
I'll
roll
hide
the
it.
secrets afterwards.
All right, you're hidden.
Hide it.
Time for a coffee, Phil.
No, we're not taking a break. It's fine.
Are you
Unless
sure
need a break.
it's not moving? Let's try something out. Christos is an annoying... Oh, you don't see it. Cool, then I don't need to type it in. Good.
Are you back? Tell me when you're ready
So-
to come back. Oh, it broke.
Broke it? You broke it.
Oh no, you're still... See,
Alright,
I needed to test it
now
out.
You're hidden. Now you're hidden. It's gone.
Never trust technical guys. So for the ones, I'll try to talk through the recording. So the command is AZ AD SP for service principal create -4-RBAC. So create an account for role-based access control. And then you can add an option --name to somehow make it a little bit more human friendly to know what the object is doing. From there, it's creating a couple of parameters that I literally need to copy paste into that service connection window in my Azure DevOps, and that's basically it. And you're good to go. You can share my screen again.
All right. You're back. Screen's back.
There we go. So I have my connection, 425 beta service connection, or service principal at least, where from here, this is what I would say your DevOps team is using, but they don't know the credentials, and that's the whole nice thing about the service principal. So back to the pipeline. Oh, we still have it open here. Little refresh, and dum-da-da-dum. This is coming from my Azure admin, because yes, I'm an admin. And for this deployment, we're going to use the 425. So that's again like emulating a user account, an Azure AD object that's having permissions on Azure. In the real world, you would lock down the permissions of this user object. Like you can deploy web apps in that specific resource group and nothing else. But in my environment, to keep it a bit flexible and open for maybe some other demos, I didn't really lock it down, but that's details. And we're going to deploy to an app service. I already have a few prepared. And since we're talking about dev, let's deploy to a dev environment.
There you go. Play it safe. Don't deploy to production, kids.
Only when you have to.
Or only when you test it.
And create a release. And there we go.
JP, is your camera still broken, or are you going with what the people want and you giving them some will tell it?
Well, I saw some.
I got tired of continuing to watch it and like, oh, it's jittery. I better go back and do it again. So I thought, well, you know.
Fine. Fine. I wonder what my character would be in Game of Thrones.
My wife was like, what? She's like, that means I'm that dim girl.
I want to be one of the
kids.
dragons.
Yeah.
I would be one of the dragons.
Did not only one survive in the end, though, out of the 3? Am I right?
Well, hey, I mean, they killed that one guy from, I don't know, I never really watched the full series, but that one guy, the king, he was like dead on the first episode. So in meantime, it's manually triggered because I pushed the button. It's using that build pipeline artifact and it's already pushing to Azure. And about similar to the details that we had before, it's initialize. Oh, it's already done. Initialize job, download the artifact, deploy to Azure. How hard can it be, right? So let's check in Azure. Web apps up here. 425 dev. Everything's there, and if all goes fine, the web app is up and running. Way cool. So that's, I would say, DevOps as a service. We started from source code, pushed it in, checking in code, moving into the validation, and eventually running it in, or pushing it in a running state. But it's not 100% solid yet. Why not? Because it's a manual driven one, and we can optimize it a bit more. So what we're going to do is moving to the fancy buzzword in DevOps. It's called CI/CD pipelines. What's a CI/CD pipeline? It's continuous integration and continuous deployment. So what it means, we're going to end-to-end automate everything. So we go back to the build pipeline. This one. And activating one small setting. And that's going to trigger continuous integration. One basic flag, but super powerful. What it means, I'm going to activate, I'm going to save it. And whenever I'm changing anything in the source code, I'm going to do it from here just to speed up the demo, but otherwise I would go back to my development environment, making a change in the source code. That's going to commit to Azure Repos, triggering a change. And the idea is that with CI, whenever there's a change coming in, it's automatically creating a new build. So let's do a license update. Any update in a file doesn't matter. There we go. Committing the changes. And if all goes fine within a couple of seconds, that pipeline should kick off and running again. Come on. Run it. Oh, it was the other one picking up. That's fine. That's a confusing part with the YAML and the non-YAML one, but it's running. We could take it one step further and imagine that my new build is compiling a new artifact or a new version of the artifact. I could go back into my release pipelines here. And also triggering continuous deployment. What this one is doing, whenever there's new code coming in from developers or ops teams, it's going to create a new artifact. The new artifact is going through that build motion, and once the build motion is complete, there's a new version of the artifact. It's a trigger, the pipeline in the release phase is going to pick it up and pushing out the new version to my Azure Web Apps.
Nice. And
Pretty
I
cool
think
stuff.
here you can also define there's filters out there. So you can say I only want to build on pushes to my specific branch or specific action, right? So if you do a pull request, then it does that.
I don't have
which is-
branches, but
Yeah, it's fine. But you know, the fact that you can select and be very specific about I only want to build my branch, my feature branch, rather than the main branch. It's important because it allows you to have multiple pipelines that cater to multiple developers as well. If you have a big team or big team.
Or
right?
one other scenario is where you're going to compile, like let's say you got 50 developers, they're all checking in code, which means you're going to produce 50 artifacts, but only at the end of the day. Like think back about the sprints.
Yeah.
Only on Friday, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to pick the latest validated build, and that's the one we're going to push into production. So quite some interesting
flexibility on how
options
you
there.
define your pipelines to work.
Good. Now I'm going to switch back to the YAML scenario because this is all like super GUI oriented. And the other nice thing about YAML is that we can combine the build phase and the release phase in one larger YAML pipeline. So I got one example. It's YAML as code. Let's see. I need to be in the 425.
It's funny that you say the other nice thing about YAML, because that kind of implies that there was an original
Already nice thing
Yeah.
about YAML.
Yeah, I think JP is passionate about YAML. And SDKs. I think he's got like two things that can really trigger him. If I say SDKs or YAML,
Yay!
he goes, yeah.
No, I'm still struggling with it, honestly. I'm not even used to, but like the last 2 years, even before VSTS a little bit, and then moved to Azure DevOps, and it was so easy. Like again, I'm not a developer, so just clicking around and pushing ARM templates in a somehow intelligent way was actually already a big step. But then now switching to YAML, it's somehow hard. And the fact that we allow you to like migrate your classic pipelines in YAML, or even copy pasting, and worst case you just go on the internet and find out what you need to use. So the first pipeline, the one we used earlier, is only the build stage, right? Where we're going to define like use the latest version of Windows as the build server, run NuGet, and all the other stuff we talked about. Now what you can do is build like a multi-stage, and whatever name you want to give it, it's just a text file, so not that important. But what I'm doing here is splitting up the different stages, where now, let's see if this moves out, there we go. I have a stage called build up here, and everything underneath that follows is literally replacing my graphical build phase. So I'm running Windows, my NuGet 5.8 you already know, VS Build, publishing the artifact. We're next on line 62. I'm starting the release. And what I'm doing there is using a task called communicate with Azure Resource Manager and run a web app deployment. And to run that, let's move out a little bit. There we go. To run that, that's my mouse interfering. We're gonna use your Azure subscription line 80. That's my service principal. So my YAML pipeline knows about this is the connection you're gonna use, but it doesn't know the credentials. And it's gonna publish to a specific web app resource in Azure and pick up that zip deploy package that it compiled in the previous steps. The outcome of that is pipelines. There should be some multi-stage up here. It's failed because I tested it and I interrupted it. But I can show you the outcome up here. So what it does is compiling build with everything from the details that I showed you in the standalone option. And next, once this is complete and successful, it's going to jump to release, and again showing you all the details. But then about halfway through I canceled it, and otherwise I couldn't show you the full demo. But it's technically the same thing. Initial build, classic, move to YAML, and now the release moving to YAML, and why not combining the two worlds together? So that's another really interesting use case. By the way, how much more time do we have?
We got about 35 minutes.
Okay, cool. Let's see. We talked about release, so we're going to make this a bit more fancy. We push to development, and let's say if my development environment is okay, we run some smoke testing, we run some functional testing, development is fine. It means that we need to go back to our pipelines and running a new pipeline deployment towards production. So why not making it a bit more efficient and defining that if dev environment is fine, we're going to provide approval to move to production right away. So in the same pipeline, we're going to add a new stage where this one is called a new deployment to Azure, because we're technically doing the same thing. And we're going to move this into a production state or what's going to happen right now is whenever there's a new build, because we enabled that CI part, it's creating a new artifact, it's going to push to dev and production. Might not be the best thing to do, right? So we can define pre-deployment, like what are the conditions that we need before production can actually start rolling. So we're going to move it after stage development. And the GUI is doing a little bit of magic, where now it means bring me a new artifact. I'm going to push out into the dev's environment, and from there I'm going to move to production. So we just need to finish this out. I could create a new service principal, but just for the sake of the demo, we're going to use the same. And up here, let's move to 425 production. I could create a new release. It's repeating the same process that I already used before and pushing to production. But there's no real intelligence, right? So before pushing this out, let's make this a little bit more intelligent. And for example, at the end of the dev deployment, we're going to run an approval. Like we want someone. How many Christoses do we have within Microsoft? A lot. What's your alias?
It's CHMATSK.
TSK. There you go. I'm not sure if you can log on to Azure DevOps, but just showing you that your Azure AD is fully integrated if you want. I'm going to make this easy because you need to follow the chat, and I'm just going to define myself as the approver. Probably not the best in a full production scenario, but perfectly fine for demos.
I am coming in hot.
Okay, so let's try and add you into CHMTSK. No.
MATSK.
Let's see how this goes. Cool.
There you go.
And that's it. So this means when the dev environment is complete, somebody needs to push the approval button before we're gonna roll out to production.
I have the
Sounds
power
good,
now.
but it's not good enough yet. Why not? We're gonna make it more intelligent, like relying on Azure backend intelligence, and we could come up with a schedule. Like, yeah, it's fine that you already approve it on Tuesday night, but we're still gonna push to production on Friday night, for example. Or one of my favorite features in Azure DevOps pipelines is using quality gates.
Yes.
What you're gonna do there is validating, like, under which conditions do I allow you to push it out. A couple of options, and I could walk through some demos. But for example, we talked about work items, right? Where in a full project management scenario, you would go like, well, why would we push out new software running a new workload deployment on Azure if Peter is too lazy and not fixing bugs? So we could run a query based on how many work items I do have in an outstanding order. So there's a couple of pre-configured queries that you could use, but I didn't enable them yet. So let's quickly switch to boards. Come on, Azure. I said quickly. So we can come up with
Can't
a new
post these
query.
things.
I know, it's technology. And I do have open issues.
Someone is asking on the stream, I usually do a pre-deployment approval on the production step. Is there some benefit on using post-deployment approval instead?
No, technically it's the exact same. There's nothing in between, so it would be the same.
Pre and post approval, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you could do it like twofold. An approval, like let's say Christos is approving the end of the dev stage and somebody else is approving the kickoff of the production stage. That could be another option.
Nice.
So let's do a new query where I'm going to use if you have any work items and the state, or let's do open issues, and the state is any of these to do. We do have one of those. Then this is open stuff. And we're gonna move this into the shared queries, might help as well.
Mm-hmm.
And running it. Nothing, why not? What did I miss? Work item issue to do. Work items. I don't have issues. Then let's create a new issue. This is Peter's release gate issue. There we go. And it's in a to-do state. Fine. Run query, there is one. Cool. So now I can go back and worst case, open stuff. If there's more than one open, we're gonna block the release. So we need to make sure that our developers or DevOps teams are fixing the work items. And you could make this a lot more fancy where you could filter based on like not just the work item type, but also like the last, I don't know, 5 work items, or if you're defining issues, but also bugs and anything else. So it's a lot more granular than what I'm showing you. And validate, let's see, upper threshold 1, lower threshold. Let's move it to 1 as well.
And while you're setting that up, there's a question from Sahil about whose responsibility is to create the stories in Azure Board. Is it the developer or the Scrum Master?
That would probably be the Scrum Master. Yeah.
If you have a Scrum Master in the team.
If you have one. Or the senior developer.
Yeah.
Or the internship developer. Just hammering work items.
Yeah. Scrum. I agree, Bold. Yeah.
So check every 5 minutes. So there's going to be a little delay, but I already have it in another pre-configured pipeline if you want to see it. So every 5 minutes, it's going to check like, hey, do you have work items? Yes or no? And if so, we're going to block the deployment.
Right.
So let's start with this. That's saved, create new release. We're going to do dev and prod together, and it starts running. So it's again waiting in queue to show you that our dev environment is still up and running. And if I switch to prod, I already have the placeholder that just went away. Somebody asked me to zoom in my browser, and I don't like doing that for obvious reasons. There it's back, and it's a placeholder, right? So the service is live, but it's not having code yet.
Yep.
So it is running, and it's pending approval.
Very nice.
Do you see it on your side, or do you want me to push the button?
You push the button.
Like good. Christos is
Too slow.
Nah, that's not nice. Busy with something else.
No, man.
And then your manager is going to ask like, oh, Christos, what are you working on these days instead of approving pipelines?
Yeah, tell me about it.
Oh, we actually need you. Pending
Ooh,
override.
you got me. Let me see. Should I have received an email from that?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. I got the email.
Oh, okay, cool then. I'm not gonna do
approval.
anything.
Don't do anything. I'm approving now.
Nope. I'm not touching it.
I'm logged in, and I'm just about to approve it. Yeah, fine.
So the nice thing, since you're somehow into identity, right? So the nice thing is that you don't need to be part of my Azure DevOps project to be an approver.
Also,
I
may
gave
not
you
be able to
permission.
see- I may not be able to see source code or whatever else, but I can still approve
nothing.
it? Nice.
Yep.
So business people can approve, like the project lead can approve, or the team lead can approve without them knowing or understanding what's happening in the pipeline, right? It's like sign
Yes.
off. Good.
Yep. So I'm
Right. I'm approving now. Pressing the button. I had to put.
okay. Cool. Look at that. Cloud powers.
Yeah.
And now it's moving on to the next step, where it's validating my release gate. So it's checking if there are any open issues. And as you can see, there's a delay of like 5 minutes.
Yep.
So
to check
technically we
for
could-
work items. Is that the 5 minutes that we added as a delay there?
Yeah, it's always 5 minutes.
Right. Oh.
So the quality gates is always 5 minutes. So I'll keep this running. Now there's one thing in the whole DevOps flow that we didn't really emphasize, and it's like even in this scenario, I'm pushing my web app deployment or any other resource deployment, but this is a web app, to an already existing Azure backend.
Yes.
So my ops team created the infrastructure using ARM templates, maybe manual, using Terraform or anything else, and it's already there. So it's not, I would say, 100% full DevOps motion ready, right? So let me switch to another project and show you some of the other capabilities.
So, question here: would you have two separate pipelines and two separate repos, one for infra and one for code, or would you combine them in the same release pipeline, and do first the infra and then the code? Because people may be wondering what is the recommended approach here. What would Microsoft recommend?
What you got?
Spot there. You're representing Microsoft now. Go.
Nice. Let me do my hair a little bit. Oh no, our CEO doesn't have any hair anymore. I would say that the flexibility comes in that you can actually decide how you're gonna do it. Like the example I have, and that's the process I'm actually using most, is somehow using the build stage. Let's see. Using the build stage to compile software, which means that I'm not running any like infra deployments in the initial pipelines. But next to that, I'm actually running my infra deployments as part of my software deployment. Now the reason why, because in this example here, what I'm building is an end-to-end deployment solution where anyone coming in could technically just push the deploy button and it's going to deploy all pipelines. That's the idea. So as long as I would say your infra part and the software release part is the same, I don't see any issues in combining them. So what it looks like in a real life scenario. So this is my e-commerce example.
Yep.
Where out of the builds, I'm compiling my ASP.NET, everything I showed you before. And in my release, I'm deploying Azure resources. So what I'm doing is running a set of Azure CLI scripts where I'm going to create an Azure resource group up here.
Yep.
Using the dollar variables. I'll show you that in a minute after zooming out. Next to that, I'm creating a new SQL Azure database server. I'm creating a firewall rule
Password over there. Tan, tan, tan.
up here, creating some firewall rules to allow my web app to connect to SQL.
Yep.
And from there, I'm deploying a second CLI script where I'm creating a new database.
Right.
So I got my SQL server deployed in step 1. Next to that, create a SQL database. Once it's done, deploy a fresh Azure web app. Create an app service plan, and next to that, create an empty web app using ASP.NET because that's what my app is using. Then I'm using CLI. This could be PowerShell, this could be any other command language, where I'm running a SQL restore. Where is my database? It's in Azure Storage. So I asked my SQL DBA, can you provide me a backpack file from your SQL database running on-prem, running on a VM in Azure?
Yeah.
Provide it to me, uploading it into Azure Storage. And now I'm just grabbing that file from Azure Storage and running a command line restore. So connect to storage, read out the storage account key. That's happening all here, and run the database import. AZ SQL import, point to the resource group, the SQL server that I created in step 1, and that's it. Once my database is there, I'm gonna push my web app and grabbing that zip file from the build pipeline, and all the way at the end, but that's just for my workload, I need to update my app settings because my database was coming from my on-prem environment. In the web app, I don't have any database connection string because I don't know my database endpoint yet, right?
Yeah.
And that's all getting automatically updated from here. The outcome I can actually show you. Oh, not anymore. I can push. I was switching too fast.
People are like, hey, there's a lot of white background here. By the way, there's a dark theme for Azure DevOps if you fancy rolling like that, just to be aware.
So I'm running this. And so it's kicking off. If all goes fine, there's no approvals, nothing, just my internal environment. But if all goes fine, it's deploying a fresh SQL Azure server instance, creating an empty database, running an import, deploying creating a web app instance, running the web app deploy, and I have my environment up and running in 6-7 minutes. But this is because the assumption is that this kind of workload will always be removed. Like, yes, in my Azure trainings, I'm using this example a lot because the most typical workload you're going to run on Azure is probably a web app and a database at some point in time.
Yes.
And I was so tired of creating everything manual. I was so tired of running PowerShell scripts. And I was like, I'm scratching my environment Friday night at the end of the training. And Monday morning, 20 minutes before starting class, I'm running a bunch of pipelines and that's it.
So I have a question here. So some of these tasks are pulling environment variables, right? Am I correct? Like the SQL database requires an admin username and password. Would you prefer that over using the service principle that this task is running under to pull those secrets from Key Vault?
Yeah, that's...
Pull them across?
Yeah, so the first option is obviously, I would say, the easiest one, the maybe flexible one, is where you're going to define all your variables as part of the pipeline.
Which are
There's another
right?
option.
These are all
What's
encrypted. These are all encrypted behind the scenes. So
yeah, if you want, you can do that. Yep.
Right.
Another option, so this is specific variables for this pipeline. Now, if you have other variables like the resource group name, another pipeline I have is pushing the same workload but using containers in Azure Container Instance. But I'm using the same resource group because that's the one I'm using for my trainings or anything else. So then the best practice would be moving into a variable group. And then you can share them across your project.
Yep.
If you want, you could also create them and share them across organization, but I never really seen that in action. But from a security and somehow identity perspective, I can see that you're a little bit worried. So the best practice would be integrating this with Key Vault. So what we can do, I knew you were going to talk about Key Vault. So I do have
it's
a
my
Key Vault
second
example.
favorite service, if not the first one. I don't know. Still trying to decide.
What's the first one? Managed identities?
Well, it's not a service, right? So Marsden is an artifact of, or it's an artifact of Azure AD. Now, obviously, I have to say Azure AD because I work for Azure AD or Identity. So I would say Microsoft Identity is my first service, and then Key Vault, Storage, and App Insights, my top 5.
App Insights, it's cool.
Yeah.
So what we're doing here is, again, integrating a task. task called Key Vault. There we go. Add it into the scenario. Again, using a service principal. So there's a different service principal that I created for connecting to Azure Key Vault than the one I'm using for actually running the deployment.
Nice.
And what this one is doing is connecting to Key Vault and using the Key Vault access policies.
Yes.
I'm defining that, any of these, I have no idea by heart which one it is. And it's slowing down a little bit. Come on, let me scroll down, please. There we go. So probably this one, I don't know. I'm defining that you can read out secrets. And what the pipeline is doing is connecting to this Key Vault and reading all secrets.
Right.
And that's not really a security issue, because the way how access policies is working is you can read out Key Vault, you can read out secrets but not keys. But up till now you cannot specify, like, you can read out the SQL secrets in Key Vault but not the web app or connection strings or anything else. So from here it's grabbing Key Vault, it's looking for secrets, and then back to my variables here.
Wait a minute.
I can...
Do you say you can actually filter secrets now? Go back.
No, not yet. No, not yet.
Oh, you said there's a secrets filter there. Go back to the previous setting.
Oh, no. So here, you can filter it from here.
Oh, from inside the task.
Yeah, but I'm using star, which means like connect to Key Vault and read out all the secrets. Where you go like, well, why would I read out all the secrets if I only need one of them, right? But up till now, Key Vault allows you permissions on the object type, but not on the actual object content.
Yeah, I still think that this is a fine-tuned control that we probably need to add at some point, because let's say that specific pipeline should only have access to 2 secrets, not be able to list all the secrets, because there's nothing stopping you from using an Azure DevOps task to actually go and enumerate all
Reading
the secrets.
out. Yeah. So what you could do from
Did
here
Did I say that loud? Damn.
Yeah, and it's recorded. And I don't know, you're part of the identity team, but if I would say something like that...
I'll speak to the Azure DevOps team, we'll have it fixed by tomorrow.
Yeah. TP is going to probably cut like 3 seconds out of the recording now. But what you could do here is, knowing that, where's my Key Vault? If my Key Vault secret is, I don't know, PDT or anything, then I could go back to my pipeline and here, like, search for all secrets starting with PDT or, whatever name you want to give it, right?
Yep.
So there's at least some level of control. The next, so I read out Key Vault, grab that information. Next, I'm running an ARM deployment.
Right.
Where it's picking up the resource group from the variables. It's picking up a template from my Azure repos. So in my repos, I got my Azure deploy. And I can override template parameters. So the nice thing is, I go to repos. Cool, we got 12 minutes. This is so awesome, best moment of the day. So I got my Azure deploy. Generic ARM template as you know it.
Yep.
Nothing fancy in there. Nothing points to, oh, this is a template that you're going to use for Azure DevOps. It's the most generic template that you use from the portal using PowerShell CLI to deploy it.
Right.
Where now I go in like, oh, this is my template file. This is the parameter file.
Right.
And for each and every parameter in there, I can override information. Like the SQL DBA password, that's what I grabbed from Key Vault in the previous step in the pipeline.
So as long as you provide the right name here, it will pass it along, right? There's nothing intelligent to say. So you list all the secrets that you need from Key Vault, or you create that ability to pull those secrets, and then here you have defined which secret you want to use. So as long as you don't screw up the name, it will pull it correctly, right?
Yep.
Nice. That's a different approach. I usually do parameters .json deployment. So I have the deployment file and the parameters, and the parameters also have the ability to pull across the secrets from Key Vault. But that's a different approach to what you're doing here. That's nice.
But this is moving the, like, go out and find me the resources is now a pipeline task. It's not an ARM task or a
Yes, you don't have a
ARM
dependency on
template
ARM
task
templates.
anymore.
Yes.
No,
Like it.
it's
Sweet.
pushing customers into use pipelines.
Yes.
So no, pretty cool stuff. This is really nice. Now let's see how far our other release is. Looks like production worked fine. Am I in the correct location? 425 beta. This shouldn't have. Okay, there we go. So it checked the work items, like, hey, do you have outstanding items? And for some reason, I don't know, it deployed it. If you want to drill down on the details, it's gonna validate. So up here, it's gonna validate running that query, searching for a type work item, running some Azure DevOps REST API integration, and somewhere it's gonna end up like the result is a 0, and that's good to go because we only allowed 0. And running some other validations, no idea what it's doing. Oh, there we go. It's identifying 1283. That's the number of my work item.
Uh-huh.
And at some point in time, it got cleared and then eventually running to production.
So we
So
have
that's
somebody on the chat that says there, it's our Microsoft. I don't know how to pronounce that. Yeah, like, we're a small shop. We cannot spend time on automating. And I did say this is sad to hear because automation may take some time up front, and you probably see that all every day, Peter. But I think automation takes a little bit of time up front to learn how to set it up. And once you configure it, you have a repeatable, continuous deployment that can help you and frees up a lot more time in the future. So that's my take, but I would be keen to hear what you have to say for people that say, well, we don't have time to automate. It's hard to do it, or I don't know how to do it, or how do they get started? Are there resources for people to get started with Azure DevOps automation or any automation for that matter?
Well, I would say switching to my trainer cap, there is Microsoft Learn. And what you can do there is going through a series of like online lab tasks where you don't need an Azure subscription. You can just go to the Learn website. I could actually show you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find if I can see. Get started with Azure DevOps. Is that the one? Get
Yeah,
started with
probably.
DevOps? Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. It's all free, by the way. You can register on MS Learn, and you can go through steps as Peter says. You don't have to have a subscription even. It will allow you to do all that without requiring any setup. That's the important bit.
The other thing I could offer, so to obviously prep the session a little bit, I took some notes here and there, and technically everything that I've been showing in like the last 2 hours, I have a pretty draft document on how to achieve that. So feel free to, I would say, reach out on Twitter or shoot me an email, and more than happy to share the document with you to get you started. Because
maybe do a blog post. Maybe we can work on a blog post so people can actually see how to set it up step by step. Maybe that's a approach,
we could,
right?
Yeah, we could do that. We could do that, definitely.
Perfect.
Because there's nothing wrong, and I totally understand the feedback, but there's something wrong in not having enough time for automating things. And it's not because doing it manual is wrong, totally not, but it's more error prone. So every now and then you're probably gonna memorize steps and then you forget about them and something is not gonna work fine as it should be. And you could take small steps, like moving from manual deployments to like an ARM template could be step 1, or just compiling your software, or even already using Azure Repos, like having multiple developers or sysadmins sharing code, working together, running some testing validation. That's already a big step forward. And then the other part with, like what I showed you in the other example, running a couple of Azure CLIs scripts to deploy an Azure backend,
Right.
you probably already do that today. You're going to open up Cloud Shell, you're going to run some commands, and you deploy a web app, you deploy a VM, you deploy whatever you want on Azure. And you just have that collection of scripts, just move them in a pipeline, and you're already automating. It takes you like 5 minutes, maybe an hour, but you're going to make your job so much more fun by doing that.
I agree. I think we have like 4 or 5 minutes left. So, is there where people can reach out to you if they have any questions? Obviously, we're gonna put this on YouTube, and we'll try to write a blog post with some of the steps. Anything else that you want our audience to know, Peter?
It's normally coming in the chat, I guess. Apparently, it's not. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
So it's PDTIT on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm not on Snapchat or Instagram because I'm probably getting too old for that.
I feel the same, man. Like some of these things are way over my head.
And petender@microsoft.com. I tried PDT at Microsoft, but it's the PowerShell deployment toolkit. So it's still DevOps, but I didn't want to receive anything that's PowerShell related.
True, and I'll add our, connecting with us details here. So let me just add them to the chat as well. So if people want to connect with us, there you go.
Please explain. He really wanted to know.
A visitor. Well, anyway, so Friday we've got. What do we have Friday?
No. Wednesday. This Wednesday we're doing something with bald bearded programmer.
Oh, bald bearded builder on Friday. Wednesday.
Yes, Wednesday we're doing something on security. We'll be on his channel. We'll be guests. So make sure to watch us. I think we're going live at 10. We'll put updates on our social calendar so you can go and see it there and stuff. Make sure to follow us on Discord. I can't thank Peter enough for joining us this late from Belgium to do this awesome session.
It was fun. Thanks for having me.
We learned quite a bit. No, man, it was our pleasure. We learned quite a bit. People were excited to ask questions and stuff. So it's been great, and we'd love to have you back at some point if you want to do more DevOpsy things.
Well, we didn't really cover anything on GitHub Actions, so that could be something for early next year or so.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll set it up. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, make sure to reach out to us. If you have any stories and you want to bag a nice water bottle or a coffee mug, make sure to email us your stories, what you build with Azure DevOps. With Microsoft Identity. Anything goes. And reach out to us, and we would love to see you all on Wednesday and Friday.
And then Friday we've got. I think Friday Layla's coming. Correct.
Yeah.
What do we have on Friday? Layla codes it. Yeah, that'll be fun.
Layla codes it. Yeah. Exciting stuff.
Yeah, so we're gonna go. Let's go find somebody to go hang out with for the rest. Let's go to Layla right now. Why not? Right?
Yes.
All right. So we'll be back.
Thanks, everyone.
So yeah, Wednesday come hang with us. Friday come hang with us, and
Wednesday.
Yeah. We're gonna go over and see what Layla's working on. Should be a lot of fun. We will be back. We'll see you on Wednesday with BBB, and we'll be back Friday here. Same time, same channel. And maybe my camera will be working by then.
Or you get a new PC.
Yeah, it's anybody's guess. See you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.